What if the very habits you've been taught to avoid are the ones that unlock your originality? Original thinkers don't chase certainty, they create in the unknown. It's not the speed of action that makes someone original, but the depth of waiting. When we think about the surprising habits of original thinkers, the very first one that emerges is their ability to thrive in uncertainty. Most people, when they face the unknown, feel fear rising in their chest. Their minds immediately begin to search for certainty, for something familiar, for the comfort of what has already been proven and tested. Yet it is precisely in this space of the unknown where true originality is born. The habit of the original thinker is not to escape uncertainty, but to step fully into it and allow themselves to expand within it. Uncertainty is not chaos. Uncertainty is pure potential. It is the field where all possibilities exist before they are observed, before they collapse into the material world. For the average person, uncertainty feels like a threat because it represents a lack of control. But for an original thinker, uncertainty is an invitation. It is the invitation to create something new, to reach into the invisible and bring forth the unseen. They understand that every invention, every masterpiece, every breakthrough in history came from the fertile ground of uncertainty. Think about it. If you are living by the same thoughts you had yesterday, you are recreating the same predictable future. The mind is rehearsing the same emotions, the same choices, and the same outcomes. That is the known. And while the known is comfortable, it is also the prison of repetition. Original thinkers break free of this cycle by deliberately entering the unknown, where nothing is guaranteed and nothing is predictable. They know that the unknown is where the seeds of creation are planted. Most people resist uncertainty because the brain craves patterns. The brain's survival mechanism looks for what is familiar because familiarity equals safety. When uncertainty arises, it triggers survival emotions, anxiety, doubt, hesitation. But original thinkers have trained themselves to stay longer in that place of discomfort, to lean into it instead of running away. They do not immediately try to solve the unknown by reaching for the familiar. They breathe into the gap, and in that pause, they create space for something new to emerge. This habit is not natural for most. It requires awareness. It requires the ability to recognize when the body is reacting with fear or stress and to choose a higher response. The original thinker does not let the conditioned body dictate their choices. Instead, they allow uncertainty to open a door into possibility. They know that the unknown is not a place to fear, but a place to create from. Consider the way great innovators throughout history operated. They did not have a blueprint when they were stepping into uncharted territory. They didn't have guarantees that their ideas would succeed. They lived in the unknown. Thomas Edison didn't know exactly how the light bulb would work after thousands of failed attempts. Einstein didn't know where his thought experiments would lead when he imagined riding on a beam of light. They were not threatened by uncertainty, they were fueled by it. Their minds were alive in the mystery. Thriving in uncertainty is not about reckless risk. It is about aligning with a deeper intelligence, the one that exists beyond the analytical mind. Original thinkers quiet the noise of constant analysis, and instead they access intuition, creativity, and inspiration. They understand that when you are too certain, when you know too much, you close yourself off from what is waiting to be discovered. Certainty is a closed loop. Uncertainty is an open field. In practical terms, thriving in uncertainty looks like making peace with not knowing the outcome. It is being willing to take the step without seeing the whole staircase. It is waking up each morning without needing to control the entire day, but instead holding the day as a canvas for the unexpected. This is why original thinkers often surprise us. They allow space for surprises to arise in their own lives. They create by surrendering to the flow of uncertainty, while most cling tightly to predictability. The habit of living in uncertainty rewires the mind and body. At first, it may feel uncomfortable, even frightening, but as one continues to sit in that space, the nervous system adapts. The fear of the unknown transforms into curiosity. Curiosity becomes inspiration. Inspiration becomes creation, and creation is the expression of originality. The original thinker does not just tolerate uncertainty, they fall in love with it because they see it for what it truly is, infinite potential waiting to be realized. This is why so many people who cling to certainty remain trapped in mediocrity. They only repeat what is already known. They mimic, they replicate, they follow. But originality cannot be copied. It requires stepping into territory that has never been mapped before. And the first step into that territory will always feel uncertain. The question is whether one will shrink back into safety or expand into possibility. Original thinkers consistently choose the latter. Uncertainty, then, becomes their ally. It is the very ground they stand on to build something the world has not yet seen. They shift their inner state from fear to wonder, from survival to creation. They understand that to live in certainty is to live in limitation, and to live in uncertainty is to live in expansion. Original thinkers thrive in this paradox because they are not bound by the old programs of the past. They step willingly into the unknown, knowing that it is the only place where true originality can emerge. Another surprising habit of original thinkers is their ability to delay immediate action. In a world that glorifies speed, urgency, and instant results, this habit seems almost counterintuitive. Most people believe that when an idea arises, the fastest way to validate it is to act immediately. Society conditions us to think that hesitation is weakness, that waiting is procrastination, and that pausing is a sign of doubt. But for original thinkers, delay is not procrastination. It is incubation. It is a conscious choice to allow the idea to unfold, deepen, and take on new dimensions before it is acted upon. When the mind first generates an idea, it is often raw, unpolished, and incomplete. It might be a spark, but not yet a flame. Original thinkers know that if they rush to execute immediately, they risk confining the idea to its earliest form, limiting its potential. Instead, they allow the subconscious mind to work on the idea, to test it against different scenarios, to let it expand in silence. They trust that in the space of waiting, new insights will surface that would have never emerged in the rush of action. This is not the same as laziness. Laziness resists action out of fear, distraction, or apathy. The delay of an original thinker is purposeful. It is a delay filled with reflection, curiosity, and openness. They understand that the most powerful ideas are not born in a single moment, but in the accumulation of many moments of contemplation. They allow their thoughts to marinate, much like a seed requires time in the soil before it can sprout into a living form. In the stillness of delay, something extraordinary happens. The brain shifts from analytical thinking into creative association. Ideas begin to connect with one another. Patterns reveal themselves. Insights bubble up from the subconscious mind when least expected, sometimes during a walk, in the shower, or while resting. By not rushing, original thinkers give themselves permission to receive inspiration rather than force it. They understand that creativity is not commanded, it is invited. Delaying immediate action also protects them from the trap of conformity. When you act too quickly, you often default to what is familiar, to what others have already done, to what the world expects. But when you pause, you give yourself the chance to ask deeper questions. Is this truly my vision? Can this be approached differently? What if I invert the problem? What if I challenge the assumptions everyone else is making? In that pause, the ordinary idea begins to transform into something original. Consider some of the great breakthroughs in history. Many of them were not the result of rushing, but of allowing time for reflection. Newton observed an apple falling, but he didn't immediately declare the theory of gravity. He spent years contemplating, experimenting, refining. Similarly, great writers often speak about letting their drafts sit before revisiting them, allowing the subconscious to reshape the story. This pause, this delay, is not wasted time. It is the gestation period of originality. Delaying action also requires the ability to be comfortable with incompletion. Most people feel uneasy leaving an idea unresolved. The mind craves closure, and action feels like the fastest path to resolution. But original thinkers resist that urge. They allow the tension of incompletion to linger, because they know that this tension is the creative pressure that eventually gives birth to something new. By holding the idea in an open state, they allow more possibilities to be considered before choosing one. There is a profound wisdom in waiting. When the body and mind are always in a rush, they operate from survival. Quick decisions, immediate actions, and urgent responses come from the same place in the brain that is designed to protect and defend. Original thinkers step outside of survival mode. They create from a higher space where time is not an enemy but an ally. They see delay not as wasted moments, but as an expanded field where the idea is free to grow. This delay also refines clarity. Acting too quickly can scatter energy in many directions, often leading to burnout or disappointment. But when one waits, reflects, and allows, the vision crystallizes. The action that follows is not frantic, but deliberate. It carries more weight, more intentionality, and often produces greater impact. Original thinkers do not confuse movement with progress. They wait for alignment, knowing that aligned action accomplishes far more than hurried activity. In delaying immediate action, they also disrupt the cycle of instant gratification. Modern culture thrives on immediacy, instant messaging, instant results, instant feedback. But originality cannot be rushed into existence. It requires patience, and patience requires trust. The trust that the idea will mature in its own time, the trust that the subconscious will reveal deeper truths, and the trust that waiting will yield something far richer than rushing ever could. Original thinkers, therefore, live in a paradox. They act decisively when the moment is right, but they also wait when the idea is not yet ready. They do not confuse delay with stagnation, nor do they let the pressure of external expectations force them into premature action. They hold the idea in the womb of possibility, nurturing it until it reaches its moment of birth. And when they finally move, their action carries the force of originality, because it has been shaped not only by time, but by the depth of their inner awareness. One of the most surprising habits of original thinkers is their ability to reframe failure. Where most people see failure as the end, as evidence that something is not possible, or that they are not capable, original thinkers see it as information, as feedback, as a necessary part of the process of creation. They do not collapse under the weight of mistakes, nor do they allow failure to define them. Instead, they learn to look at failure from a higher vantage point, one that transforms setbacks into stepping stones. Failure, for most, carries an emotional weight. It triggers shame, disappointment, embarrassment, or even self-doubt. The body reacts to failure as if it were a threat, and the mind often begins to replay the event, reinforcing feelings of limitation. This is why so many people avoid risk. They are not afraid of failing itself. They are afraid of the emotions they associate with failing. But original thinkers develop a different relationship with these emotions. They learn to observe them without being consumed by them. They see failure not as a reflection of their identity, but as part of the creative process that shapes originality. To reframe failure is to change its meaning. Most people attach failure to self-worth. If the idea fails, then I have failed. But original thinkers break this pattern. They separate themselves from the outcome. The idea may not have worked, the attempt may have collapsed, the effort may not have delivered the result. But that does not mean the thinker is diminished. Instead, they understand that failure reveals something about the approach, the timing, the execution, or the perspective. It becomes data that informs the next attempt. Reframing failure also means understanding that every mistake carries within it the seed of progress. Each unsuccessful attempt removes one pathway that does not work, bringing clarity about the pathways that might. It is a process of refinement. Thomas Edison famously described his experiments not as failures, but as discovering thousands of ways that did not work. That shift in perception allowed him to persist when others would have given up. It was not blind persistence. It was persistence informed by reframing each outcome as useful information. Original thinkers also view failure as an essential teacher of resilience. Without failure, there is no stretching of boundaries, no testing of limits, no real growth. When something fails, the mind is forced to adapt, to reconsider, to imagine new possibilities. In this sense, failure is not the opposite of success. It is the foundation of it. It is the sculptor that shapes the raw material of creativity into something sharper, clearer, and more innovative. There is also a spiritual dimension to this reframing. When failure occurs, it often exposes the illusions of control. It humbles the thinker, reminding them that creation is not always linear and predictable. Original thinkers accept this uncertainty, and instead of resisting, they surrender to it. In doing so, they access deeper creativity. They allow failure to move them into new territory they may not have reached if everything had gone according to plan. Many breakthroughs are born out of what initially looked like failure, a discovery made by accident, a mistake that revealed a new path, a collapse that cleared the way for a more aligned vision. Reframing failure also liberates the thinker from the fear of judgment. Most people fear failing because they fear how others will perceive them. They worry about rejection, ridicule, or being labeled as incapable. But original thinkers do not let external voices define their internal journey. They recognize that the opinions of others are fleeting, but the lessons gained from failure are enduring. This freedom from judgment gives them the courage to attempt what others will not, to step into risks that seem unreasonable, and to pursue ideas that have not yet been validated. Another powerful aspect of reframing failure is the way it rewires the brain. Each time an original thinker encounters failure and consciously chooses to reinterpret it, they build new neural pathways. Instead of reinforcing patterns of fear and avoidance, they strengthen patterns of curiosity and resilience. Over time, this becomes a habit. Failure no longer triggers paralysis. It triggers inquiry. They ask, what can I learn from this? What is this teaching me about my process, my perspective, my growth? This neurological shift creates a mindset that is not only more original, but also more expansive. When failure is reframed, it also transforms the energy of the thinker. Instead of collapsing into defeat, they remain in a state of openness. They maintain the frequency of possibility, which allows them to stay connected to inspiration. In this state, they do not waste energy on self, criticism, or regret. That energy instead is channeled back into creation. They become more efficient, not because they never fail, but because they refuse to waste emotional energy on interpreting failure negatively. Perhaps the greatest gift of reframing failure is that it keeps the thinker moving. Many people stop after their first setback, convinced it is a sign to give up. Original thinkers, however, keep experimenting. They understand that the road to originality is paved with broken attempts, missteps, and revisions. Failure is not a signal to retreat. It is part of the journey forward. This ability to continue, to move through the cycles of creation without being derailed by temporary outcomes, is what allows them to reach originality that others never discover. In the end, failure is simply experience. And original thinkers, by reframing it, turn every experience into material for growth. They remove the sting from the word and replace it with curiosity, resilience, and expansion. They transform what most people see as an obstacle into a gateway. And it is through that gateway that originality is able to flourish. Another surprising habit of original thinkers is their ability to connect the unconnected. They see links between ideas, experiences, and patterns that most people overlook. While the majority of minds are conditioned to think in linear paths, original thinkers move fluidly, weaving threads from different disciplines, perspectives, and even contradictions, creating something entirely new. This is not randomness, it is a higher form of perception. They can hold complexity in their awareness and allow seemingly unrelated pieces to come together in ways that feel almost effortless, though beneath the surface, it is the product of deep curiosity and openness. Most people are trained to compartmentalize their thinking. They put mathematics in one box, art in another, philosophy in another, and personal experience in yet another. Their minds are divided by categories, labels, and rigid structures. But original thinkers break down these walls. They understand that knowledge is not fragmented, but connected, that the same patterns that govern the physical world can also be found in the psychological, the spiritual, and the creative. They search for those connections because they know that innovation rarely comes from one field alone. It emerges at the intersection of many. Connecting the unconnected requires a mind that is not in survival mode. When the brain is trapped in fear or urgency, it narrows its focus, searching for the fastest solution. It clings to what is familiar and overlooks the wider field of possibilities. Original thinkers, however, cultivate a state of openness, allowing their awareness to expand. In this state, they notice details others miss. They see relationships between events that seem unrelated, and they draw parallels between experiences that others dismiss as coincidence. Their habit is to remain curious about everything, trusting that each piece of knowledge, no matter how unrelated, might eventually fit into a larger mosaic. Think about how great breakthroughs often occur. The invention of the printing press came when Gutenberg combined the idea of coin stamping with wine press technology. The theory of evolution was informed not only by biology, but by observations of geology and natural history. Musical revolutions emerged when artists blended genres from different cultures and traditions. Each of these examples reflects the same habit, the ability to connect what appears disconnected, to see a bridge where others see a gap. Original thinkers also allow themselves to live in questions rather than demand immediate answers. By holding a question open, they create space for connections to form over time. They might ask themselves, what does this remind me of? Where else have I seen a similar pattern? How might this apply in a different context? In asking such questions, they activate the subconscious mind, which is a master at linking the seemingly unlinked. Insights often arise not during focused effort, but in moments of rest or play, when the subconscious delivers a connection that feels like revelation. This habit also reflects a way of seeing life itself. Original thinkers often recognize that everything is part of a larger system. They see how personal emotions might mirror societal patterns, how the movement of nature reflects principles of design, how ancient wisdom aligns with modern science. To them, life is not a series of disconnected parts, but a web of interdependence. They navigate the world by sensing these invisible threads and weaving them into new forms of understanding. Another element of connecting the unconnected is the willingness to embrace paradox. Most people are uncomfortable with contradiction. They want clarity, simplicity, and consistency. But originality thrives in paradox, because paradox forces the mind to stretch beyond its usual categories. Original thinkers are willing to hold two seemingly opposing ideas at once and search for the deeper truth that unites them. This ability often leads to breakthroughs because it reveals solutions hidden in the tension between opposites. To connect the unconnected also requires exposure to diverse experiences. Original thinkers do not isolate themselves within a narrow field of expertise. They explore widely, travel deeply, read broadly, and engage with perspectives outside their own. Each experience becomes a piece of a larger puzzle, waiting for the moment when it will connect with another to form a new vision. They do not dismiss an idea because it belongs to a different discipline or culture. Instead, they ask how it might complement, expand, or transform their current understanding. This habit reshapes not only the way they think, but also the way they live. By constantly linking different aspects of life, original thinkers find creativity in the everyday. A conversation with a stranger might spark a business idea. An observation in nature might inspire a piece of art. A memory from childhood might lead to an innovation in science. Because they see connections everywhere, their lives become a continuous flow of discovery, where the ordinary is infused with hidden potential. It is also important to recognize that connecting the unconnected requires imagination. It asks the thinker to go beyond what is visible and to trust in the unseen. They often entertain ideas that seem unusual or even illogical to others, because they are willing to explore before proof exists. This courage to imagine links where others see none is what allows them to create originality. Over time, what once seemed disconnected becomes obvious to everyone, but only because someone first had the vision to unite it. Ultimately, this habit allows original thinkers to transcend the boundaries of conventional thought. They do not accept limitations imposed by categories, traditions, or disciplines. They weave together fragments of knowledge and experience into a tapestry that reveals something new, something that could not exist without the courage to connect the unconnected. In this way, they transform fragmentation into wholeness, and from that wholeness, originality emerges. The final surprising habit of original thinkers is their ability to live beyond conditioning. From the moment we are born, we are shaped by layers of programming, cultural expectations, societal norms, family beliefs, and personal experiences. These form invisible patterns that guide our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. For most people, these patterns are never questioned. They become the unquestioned reality, the lens through which life is interpreted. But original thinkers possess the rare ability to step outside of this conditioning. They recognize that to think originally, one must first free themselves from the repetitive scripts of the past. Conditioning operates like an unseen script playing in the background of the mind. It tells you what is possible and what is not. It dictates how you should behave, what you should value, and what you should fear. It influences the choices you make before you are even aware you are making them. For example, if you were raised to believe that stability is more important than creativity, you may unconsciously suppress your own ideas in order to seek safety. If society conditions you to believe that success must follow a certain path, you may dismiss any calling that falls outside of that structure. This is how conditioning confines originality, by narrowing the field of possibility into the safe and familiar. Original thinkers disrupt this cycle by noticing it. They observe their own thoughts and ask, is this truly mine, or is it inherited? They examine their emotions and wonder, am I feeling this because of who I am, or because of what I have been taught to feel? By cultivating this awareness, they begin to break the automatic link between stimulus and response. They create a gap between the old program and the present moment, and in that gap lies freedom. The freedom to choose a new thought, a new emotion, a new action. Living beyond conditioning requires a deep willingness to step into the unknown. The familiar patterns of thought and behavior feel safe, even when they limit us, because they are predictable. Breaking those patterns can feel like stepping off a cliff without knowing if the ground will rise to meet you. But original thinkers accept this uncertainty because they know that originality cannot come from repetition. It comes from choosing differently, from breaking away from what everyone else has accepted as truth and daring to create a new reality. One of the ways they achieve this is by shifting their inner state. Conditioning is often stored not only in the mind but in the body. Emotions like fear, guilt, and shame become embedded in the nervous system, creating automatic reactions that feel like truth. Original thinkers practice elevating their emotional states, choosing curiosity instead of fear, wonder instead of doubt, joy instead of resignation. By changing their inner state, they interrupt the automatic programs that would otherwise keep them trapped in the same patterns. In this elevated state, new ideas have the space to emerge, ideas that could never exist in the old emotional landscape. Living beyond conditioning also means questioning the collective narrative. Every culture, every society, every generation has stories it tells about what is normal, what is acceptable, and what is possible. Original thinkers are not afraid to stand outside of these narratives. They challenge assumptions. They ask, why must it be this way? What if the opposite were true? What if the boundaries we believe in are only illusions? These questions open cracks in the wall of conditioning, cracks through which new light can enter. From that light, originality grows. It is important to note that original thinkers do not reject all conditioning blindly. They recognize that some patterns serve survival, community, and order, but they refuse to let conditioning dictate the entirety of their existence. They learn to hold only what aligns with their vision and release what limits their expression. They know that living authentically requires discernment, and discernment requires awareness of what is theirs and what has been imposed upon them. This habit also reveals itself in the way original thinkers relate to time. Conditioning often locks people into repeating the past. The mind recalls familiar experiences and projects them forward, creating a predictable future. In this way, the past becomes the blueprint of tomorrow, but original thinkers interrupt this cycle. They choose to live in the present moment, where new choices can be made that are not bound by history. By stepping out of the predictable pattern of past conditioning, they open themselves to futures that no one has lived before. Living beyond conditioning is also an act of courage. It often means standing apart from the crowd, risking misunderstanding, and enduring resistance. Most people feel comfortable when others conform to the same patterns, and uncomfortable when someone breaks free. The original thinker is willing to face that discomfort because their allegiance is not to acceptance but to truth. They choose authenticity over approval and vision over conformity. In doing so, they inspire others to question their own conditioning, creating ripples of originality that extend beyond themselves. Perhaps the most powerful aspect of this habit is that it allows the thinker to become the creator of their own inner reality. When one is no longer bound by conditioning, they are free to choose thoughts deliberately, to generate emotions consciously, and to take actions that align with their vision rather than their past. They no longer recycle yesterday's mind. They create today's mind anew, and from that new mind, originality is born, not as a fleeting spark, but as a way of being that continuously expands into greater expression. The surprising habits of original thinkers reveal a truth that challenges the way most of us have been conditioned to live. They thrive in uncertainty, entering the unknown not with fear but with openness, knowing it is the only place where new possibilities can emerge. They delay immediate action, resisting the pressure of urgency, allowing ideas to incubate and mature until they are ready to unfold. They reframe failure, seeing it not as an end but as vital feedback that shapes resilience and fuels innovation. They connect the unconnected, weaving together ideas, disciplines, and experiences into breakthroughs that transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. And most importantly, they live beyond conditioning, stepping outside of the repetitive programs of the past to consciously choose new states of thought, emotion, and possibility. Together, these habits show us that originality is not a gift given to a select few, but a choice, a practice, and a way of seeing the world. It is not about being faster, safer, or more certain. It is about being willing to step into the unknown, to wait for deeper insight, to see mistakes as part of creation, to connect what others overlook, and to free ourselves from the limits of old patterns. To think originally is to live differently, to create not from repetition, but from possibility. It is in these habits that we find the blueprint for living as creators of our own lives, expanding into the kind of thinkers who leave a mark not because they followed the world, but because they dared to reimagine it.